Well, I just want to say it's a privilege to be with you and to have an opportunity to share what is so basic to us as Christians and basic to us as Dominicans, and that is living lives of peace and justice. Just to explain first, justice promoter is a Dominican term. So Dominican sisters and priests have justice promoters in their congregations. And basically that a justice promoter is really a symbol I would use is a loudspeaker, a microphone, because the poor, the marginalized do not have a microphone. They do not have a loudspeaker. They need advocates out there who will speak on their behalf for justice. So that's it. We say, well, yeah, we deal with political issues. Well, political issues are moral issues. So immigration is a political issue. It's also a moral issue. Putting children in cages at the border, that's a moral issue. Being able to buy military-style assault weapons that can kill hundreds of people in a few minutes, that's a moral issue. Yes, it takes a political piece of legislation to change that. So political issues, moral issues, the same. And we have guidance from both Hebrew scriptures and Christian scriptures. I think Prophet Micah said we to love tenderly, walk justly, love tenderly, act justly, and walk humbly with your God. And the Christians, whatever you find in any of the Gospels, invite us to be people of justice throughout the Gospels. So we can see the prophets, for instance, in the Hebrew scriptures, Jesus in the Christian scriptures, Jesus had both feet firmly planted with the poor. So that's all I want to say about that. I want to, before mentioning the corporate stances, I want to say something that's very timely for us right now, and that's the issue of racism. And what's being played out in streets around our country. We've had several instances, one of them, unfortunately, here in Louisville, of police brutality. We saw in Minneapolis a police officer kneeling on the throat of an African-American man for over 8 minutes. So we know what has happened. And why is that important? It's important because we can't just look and see. It calls us to some kind of responsible action. It's not enough to have knowledge about something. What do you do with the knowledge? Okay? And I think what's going to happen soon, there will be pieces of legislation in our U.S. Senate already being put together right now. To come up with ways of addressing racism in policing. One, I think, will be to make it illegal to have a chokehold. That's regarding Minnesota. Another may be to make it illegal to have a no-knock warrant, like in Louisville, where police can just storm in. And so this 26-year-old woman and her boyfriend were there. They were in the wrong place. They were not involved in drugs. And she was shot, I think, 8 times and killed. So those are two things that they might consider. Another that I think needs to be considered is if a police officer is fired from his or her job, that makes that person unable to get another job in another police department somewhere else, whether as a sheriff or a guard in a department store. Those are some of the things that are being considered. So I'm just saying that right now our community is very concerned about that. In fact, we're all going to be getting signs for all of our mother houses on racism. We're going to be getting prayer cards. There'll be other ways that we as a community can speak out, and religious congregations around the country have been speaking out. So that's what I want to say about that. I mentioned that first because it's on the front burner of our country. And we've had people of many faith traditions, not just Catholics, who are coming out and speaking out in our newspapers, online, television, and so forth. So I invite you to, if these bills come up for a vote, to get on the phone or email, have your voice out there. What do we need to do? Our voices need to be heard. So, and however you can do that. So I think that's all I want to say about the racism, and then get in, unless somebody wants to interrupt and say anything on that. Okay. Corporate stances. In 2010, I began as justice promoter. One of the things that sisters really wanted to see happen was a way that we can say as a congregation, this is what we believe. Okay. So we had to have a process for doing that. So I created a corporate stance committee. And the corporate stance committee came up with a process that would enable sisters and associates to study specific corporate stances, pray, and then vote. And so that process has been in place since 2010. And so now, on the 6 corporate stances that we have, we can say, let's say, for instance, here they are. These are the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5. These are the 5 corporate stances we've taken, first one being 2011. We can say, this is what Dominican Sisters of Peace believe on immigration reform. Okay. What has to happen is we are given 30 days to study the information that is provided through the corporate stance committee. We study it, we discuss in our local communities or in our study groups. We pray, and then we vote. And it has to be 2/3 majority for the stance to pass. So in all of those cases, they have passed with, I think all of them, with over 2/3 majority. So maybe we could look at immigration reform first and see what here. I'm going to give you just 20 seconds just to look that over first. Just look it over. Okay, I think it's pretty clear. Well, again, what we say is immigration reform is a moral issue. And people who've argued say, well, you should get in line like everybody else. Well, for many immigrants coming to the U.S., it's a matter of life or death. For some, there's violence in the country, a violent government, or violent militia that endangers the children and the parents. And so many of them flee. Some of them flee from war because they want to save their lives and the lives of their children. And in many cases, they simply want to put food on the table for their children. And they cannot find employment there enough to support a family. And so for many of them coming from Central America, South America, where else? Africa, it's for that reason. So we're in agreement really with religious organizations throughout the country, religious denominations throughout the country. The U.S. bishops have spoken out very strongly in support of the need for immigration reform that enables families to be together, not separated, and that will lead to citizenship. So that's it. You know, one of the things we hear that is blocking this is myth. Too often there are myths around immigrants. Immigrants are causing more violence. That's a myth. That's a myth, because statistics that I have read is that since the late 1990s, and that has come down. Violence has come down in that time. Myth that they're taking our jobs away. That's, yeah, just hang on there. Go back to where you were, Maya, Sister Maya, right. So that is also another myth. Immigration reform, we go back to Scripture, the Gospel of Matthew. What does Matthew say? I was a stranger and you took me in. Jesus doesn't say, I was a stranger and you arrested me. He doesn't say, I was a stranger and you don't deserve any help. So what Matthew says is like, I was hungry and you fed me. I was in prison and you visited me. I was a stranger and you took me in. That applies to every era, every time. So we look at that, at Scripture. Also, when we talk about immigrants, we must remember the dreamers, undocumented. And why are they here? Dreamers are those who came here as children. Their parents brought them here. They may be 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds. They didn't get a vote. They came with their parents because the parents were fleeing violence, or they had to come to be able to support. I've already mentioned some of the myths around that. Jobs. Well, very often the jobs that immigrants have had to take are jobs that no Caucasian in the U.S. would want, first of all. They're in the hot fields in the summer picking vegetables, picking fruit, in the hotels, changing sheets on beds, and so forth. So that is another myth. And there are many ways of addressing it. Now, what you see on the right, I was in Washington, D.C., along with 40 other sisters, priests, and concerned citizens. In 2018, there was a call for action on behalf of dreamers, and I was arrested at that point. There were 40 of us who were arrested. There was a bishop of Lexington, Kentucky, who was there with us, who did the opening prayer. Why did we do that? Well, we've tried everything else. Why does anybody do civil disobedience, which is what this is? If you've made the phone calls, if you've written the letters, if you've met with staff at a senator's office or a representative's office, if you've written letters to the editor, if you've prayed, if you've joined, if you've done all of that, what is left? Sometimes you just have to take a risk of being not understood or criticized. I was treated well. Again, I'm white, so I'm going to be treated well by the police. And so we did that, and others have done that after we left. That has continued. Where is that right now? The DACA situation was signed by President Obama, and it was an executive order. Okay, not a law, an executive order. And since that, then the Trump administration is trying to negate that and get rid of it. So now it rests in the U.S. Supreme Court. It's up to the Supreme Court now to make a decision. Will dreamers be able to stay in this country? Look, the dreamers have been here for various times. As I said, some of them maybe were babies. Dreamers study in our schools. work in our businesses, serve in our military, pray in our churches. They're doing whatever we are doing and contributing. So I think that's all I want to say right now about immigration reform and DACA. It's something I hope you will pay attention to and support in whatever way with immigration reform. Immigration reform is not going to go away quickly. It will take time, I'm afraid. But there are many people who are working hard to do something about it. And the U.S. bishops have been very strong in supporting real, fair immigration reform, as other denominations have too. Presbyterians, Methodists, people of various faith traditions. So I think we can move on from immigration reform. Human trafficking is such a sad and still serious realization of what we have. Take a moment to read what we said. Okay, human trafficking is our reality. It's a sin, and it's everywhere. People sometimes believe that human trafficking is something happening in other countries. It is happening in other countries, but it's also happening in the United States. And people are trafficked from everywhere. Why? Well, in some cases, in country X, Y, or Z, a poor child, girl or boy, is told by someone coming to the U.S., if you come with me to the U.S., I can make sure you get a job, and then you can support your family. You know your parents are struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to keep the lights on, to provide clothing for you. But if you come with me, I can help. And then you can send the money back to your parents. That will be a great help to them. Well, that's a lie. So they come to the U.S., and soon after that, they realize that they've been tricked. But if they try to go to the police, they're told, we will make sure, because you're here illegally, we'll make sure that the police put you in jail. And we will make sure that the people we know back in your country will hurt or kill your parents. You don't want to do that, so you need to cooperate with us. That's part of the problem. They are sex slaves and they're labor slaves. And this has been going on for a long, long time. So human trafficking is one of the largest profit-making industries in the world, unfortunately. And it happens everywhere. One of the places you often find trafficking is at sporting events, like the Super Bowl. That's a likely place where that will happen, because people are coming from all over the world. And they can go online and they can see ads for getting a little girl, a teenager, to be basically a sex slave. So they come here not just to go to a Super Bowl game, or to go to the Kentucky Derby, or to go to a World Series game. These are just the venues. These are just the places where often it happens. I know we have sisters in Columbus, Ohio, who have worked prior to an event to inform hotels in the area, for instance. There's what's the Arnold Schwarzenegger Power Building event. I never heard of it until a few years ago. So they go to hotels with literature that informs the managers and the staff, you need to look for the following. If there's a young girl coming with a man and she looks very nervous, and there's something not quite right, you need to pay attention. Maybe they don't even look alike. And so the signs are there. So they provide the literature. They also provide little bars of soap, you know, that you would find in a hotel. And it would have on the back, if you are in trouble, if you're held against your will or whatever, call this 800 number. So if that young girl or young boy picks up the soap, at least he or she knows they have an out. If they can get to a phone, if they can get someone to call 800 number. So stands for Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. This was started several years ago. And SOAP does just that. They work in hotels. They do presentations, educational events to let people know what's happening. Another organization you should know about is called ECPAT. ECPAT. It educates businesses. And one of the things they've done, I think they're located in New York. One of the things they've done is to work with the airline industry. So they have met with executives from airlines. If you would be willing to work with us, we would provide training to employees, airline employees. Why is that important? Because then people traveling from other countries may have a young girl being transported, and something looks fishy there. Something looks fishy. So they at least they have the written materials, they have the training, and then they can help in the whole process. I know American Airlines has come on board with that. I am not certain about other airlines because I haven't done this in a while. But they continue to do that. They continue to work with hotels. So they have met with hotel executives from Hilton to Marriott to you name it, to say, you are also important, because without knowing it, you may have in your hotels people who are being trafficked. Now you see on the right-hand corner over there, there are some sisters standing with signs, Stop Human Trafficking. That is in the Boston area, Boston, Massachusetts. Those are sisters there from Dominicans and other communities. And they do this every year, different times of the year, if there is an event going on, or they simply want to get the media attention. We need to stop human trafficking. That's one thing people are doing. They are having prayer vigils. They are writing letters to organizations like hotels and so forth. They wear white ribbons. I think it's in January. Everybody's asked to wear a white ribbon in honor of or in memory of a child who is trafficked. There is, it's a monthly newsletter called Stop Trafficking. You may want to explore that because they provide a lot of information on what is going on in the world with regard to trafficking. So reading, participating in prayer vigils or services, writing to legislators if there is a particular bill coming up for a vote in Congress. We all can do something, and you know, White, it might seem overwhelming, but we have made progress, and we've made progress because more and more people are becoming involved. So I think that, yes.
Judy, what about the U.S. Sisters Against Human Trafficking? That's another resource, isn't it?
Yes, thanks for mentioning that. This is throughout the U.S., and they do informational programs. They do some involvement with legislative action. And you know, I think one of our sisters has been involved in that, Sister Carol Davis. And so they're another effective group that we can, you know, we can be proud of, because this is not going to go away overnight. And it's as I said, it's prevalent, and it preys on desperate people, desperate children, desperate adults. We can all do something. Now, another thing, every year there is a Dominican high school preaching conference, usually held in Adrian, Michigan. And there's also a Dominican college preaching conference. So students come every year to participate, and they choose whatever justice concern they want to have information from. I have done this at least 3 times. I've gone to Adrian, and each time I was asked to speak about human trafficking. And that's one of the most popular, use the word popular, programs that students want to participate in. So that's continuing, of course, because of the pandemic. That didn't happen this year. I hope next year that will happen again. And when I haven't been able to go, another of our Dominican sisters has gone and spoken. I also spoke to the Dominican College Preaching Conference. Again, that was on human trafficking. Okay. We might be able to move on from there. I say common sense, you know, someone once said common sense is not common, unfortunately. Common sense gun control. That's a third stance. I ask you to just take a few seconds and read it. Okay. Why is this important? It's important because over 30,000 people die every year from gun violence. That's a large number. And much of it can be prevented. And there are 3 or 4 things in that recommendation are important. Background checks. Everyone who buys a gun should have to go through a background check. Why? To prevent convicted felons from being able to obtain a gun. Right now, only 60% of those who buy guns go through a background check. So if you go to a gun store, you have to go through a background check. However, if you go to a gun show, and gun shows are all over the country, go to a gun show, no one's going to do a background check. You could be a serial killer who's just been lucky and gotten away, or you could be a convicted felon and get a gun at a gun show, or you can go online and get a gun and not go through a background check. So that's 40% of people who shouldn't have guns with guns. Why is that important? Well, obviously, it's important. The Brady Bill was enacted in 1994. That's why we still have the Brady Bill, the universal background checks. Okay, the other things that we mentioned is banning assault weapons. So you coming up on your screen, what you see in front of you right now is an AR-45 military-style assault weapon. That belongs in the hands of the military, not in civilians. With an AR-15 or an AK-47, you can kill many people in a matter of a few seconds. You don't hunt a deer with a military-style assault weapon. Or you can get a rifle and hunt a deer, okay? But these are still legal. What happened, as I said, in 1994, the Brady Bill was passed. It also included banning military-style assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Fast forward 10 years. So 2004, George W. Bush was president. It had to be renewed in 10 years. He and Congress just let it die. That's why we can still get military-style assault weapons. They let the bill die. High-capacity magazines means you can attach to an assault weapon and kill even more people in a short period of time, believe it or not. That's why when I put this up for this is common sense, and it's about responsibility. Now, this is not rocket science. Now, ghost guns, if you ever watch 60 Minutes, and this happened about a month ago, 60 Minutes featured a segment on ghost guns. What is a ghost gun? A ghost gun can be manufactured, not going through a company. Online, you can find out how to put together a handgun that can be used for shooting, and it will not have a serial number. And if it doesn't have a serial number, the police can't track it. But see, if you buy a gun in a gun store or at, let's say, a gun show, it will have a serial number, so it can be traced. But the ghost gun will not have a serial number. And there's no record. Okay, there is no record of a sale. You can get away with it. And it functions just as a regular gun. Straw guns is another issue. If you are a convicted felon and you want to get a gun, but you know you can't go to a gun store, or maybe you don't think you could get away with it somewhere else, you can have your friend or a relative go to a store and buy a gun. And the gun will be registered in the name of your friend or your relative. And that friend or relative gives you the gun. So even though you shouldn't have a gun, you now have a gun because you didn't go through a process. That's what a straw gun does. Okay, we also mentioned providing support for mental health, more financial support for mental health. That's important, okay? That's important. But what I see happening too often is those who don't want any changes to gun laws will say, this is a mental health problem. You need just to address mental. Well, you know what? England has problems. England has many people who are severely mentally ill, and Germany, and France, and Spain, and Japan. They all have a problem with severely mentally ill people, but they don't have a gun problem. So just to use the issue of mentally ill, I'm sorry, as they say in the South, that dog won't hunt. That's not true. Because all these other countries around the world have strict, responsible gun laws. That's why they don't have the problem that we have in the US. Okay, you can go to the next segment. A wonderful group called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I think they're now in every state, and they're very active. They're very active here in Kentucky. They're very active in Ohio. This was started by a mom after the Sandy Hook massacre in Connecticut. She had never been involved in any kind of political effort, anything like it. And she was so disturbed that she said she had to do something. So she was going to organize moms around the country, and anybody else who's not a mom can get involved. And what do? They focus both on federal laws and state laws to try to address the gun violence issue with common sense, responsible legislation. That's what they do. In the last few years, they focused more on states than on federal law because they're getting somewhere in states. More states are becoming involved and passing responsible legislation, whereas it gets stuck in the Senate. It gets stuck in the U.S. Senate. And you have to have a House and a Senate ready to sign a bill that can make a difference in gun violence. And you have to have a president willing to sign the bill, okay? So that's the problem with federal law. They're having much more effectiveness in states. Connecticut being an example. Connecticut is a model. Connecticut has passed legislation regarding assault weapons and high capacity magazines and so forth. And that makes sense given what happened in Connecticut at Sandy Hook. It really does make a lot of sense. So applaud Connecticut and applaud, there are, I think, 12 to 15 other states that have done very well. The Brady campaign has been around before Moms Demand Action, and it's named after James Brady, who was press secretary for President Ronald Reagan, and he was shot, severely injured. He was lucky to live, and he was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. James Brady and his wife got busy and put together the Brady Bill, which eventually was supported by Ronald Reagan, who was also shot at the same time. So President Reagan, who was at first reluctant to do anything on gun legislation, did come around and he supported it. So now we have the Brady campaign. If you want to see who's doing a lot of damage in the country with regard to guns, and that's NRA, the National Rifle Association. When it was founded to be an organization about gun safety. So you know, if you're a parent, you don't leave an unlocked gun around, and you don't do this and you don't do that. That was the origin. It has gone from being about gun safety to being over the edge on saying anything you can do with a gun is fine. And so what has happened while we have so much problems getting bills passed, it's called dark money, whether it's NRA or pharmaceutical companies or oil companies or insurance companies. They give big dollar donations to senators, people running for the Senate or the House. And there's strings attached to that donation. You remember when I gave you this $500,000 for your campaign, I was expecting you to vote the way I want you to vote, okay? And here's the way I feel about guns. That's the NRA. We gave you all this money. We don't want you to pass anything, okay? And we'll be paying attention. If you don't support what NRA wants, don't expect donations from us again the next time. That's a key problem. It's the dark money, what we call dark money, pressuring our senators and our representatives. That's where that is. So what do we need? We need you to get out and vote. And when you vote, I'm not telling you how, get out and vote, but pay attention who's doing the work to promote responsible gun legislation. Keep that in mind. So I think we need to move on from there. Here we are. This was an unusual event that I participated in downtown Louisville. It was a group called Raw Tools. You bring a gun, a rifle, any kind of gun, they'll melt it down so that gun will never exist again. Now, that doesn't happen very often, many places, but there were people lined up and they were bringing in their rifles and their guns, and they were melted down, never to shoot again. Okay, next. Weapon-free building, that's another thing we did. If you go to one of our mother houses, I can't read the whole thing here, Dominican Sisters of Peace are committed to the protection of all life. Weapons are not permitted in the building. You will find those decals on all of our mother houses, some of our schools, some of our environmental places. Why do we do that? That was one of the first things I did, because we want people to know what we stand for. So when they enter the building, they know where we are on guns, okay? So it's a conversation starter. So someone reads that, comes in the building, how come you have this decal? You know, I had a friend and her husband come for a visit for a memorial mass, came to St. Catherine Mother House. He has, he carries a gun, not on the outside, but it's a permit carry. So he came to the entrance and he saw that and he had to take the gun back, put in the car. Well, we're still friends, okay? But it says these are our values. This is where we are. This is where we are with regard to guns. There is a safe way to be a gun owner and there's an unsafe way, okay? Climate change. You've already had something on climate change. I'm not going to go in any lengthy piece on this. Take a few seconds to read that, please. I think it says all that needs to be said. I consider climate change the most critical issue of our day. Our planet is crying out. And here's Sister Claire, who's already spoken. It's crying out what we are, how we are abusing our water, our air, our land. Now, the only good thing I can think about with regard to the pandemic is that our skies are cleaner. We're not driving as much. We're being more careful. The skies are cleaner. So what do we need to do? We need to do whatever we can to reduce the use of fossil fuels. Choose clean energy options. We need to do all we can to promote the use of wind energy. That's one. Wherever we can. Personal actions. We each can do something. I don't use plastic straws anymore. Why? Because they're clogging up our waters. They're killing our sea life. Buy a metal straw and take it with you. That's one thing. Just deciding you're going to do more planning when you drive. You know, instead of one errand, do the 5 errands that you have to do at some point. Education. That's simple. Paris Accord. All right, here we had a marvelous piece of before us that we signed. This was under President Obama. We signed 196 nations signed it. When President Obama came, we unsigned it. Now, if there is a difference in the election and Biden is elected, there's a 99.99% chance of signing the Paris Accord again. That's an important piece. We also need to look at, we have a Clean Air Act and a Clean Water Act. They have been whittled away, little by little, in the last 3.5 years. So do we care about clean air? Do we care about clean water? Let our words be out there. So what we can do, as you see here, we can join with others who are marching or demonstrating. We can join others in visiting with our legislators, or writing to our legislators, or calling our legislators, letting them know where we are on environmental issues. It is critical. It is critical. Okay, I think we can move on from there to the death penalty. That was in 2019, so that was recent. So take just a few seconds and read what we have here. Okay, it's simple. We oppose it for any reason. Even if it's a mass murderer, somebody like Timothy McVeigh. Pope Francis in the last year came out and said, It is never acceptable to execute another human being. That's stronger than previous popes. That's stronger than what was in the Catholic Catechism. Death penalty is not a deterrent. There's study after study that shows that executing people does not serve as a deterrent. It's not going to make other people stop and think. If a person is violently angry about something and wants to get even with another individual, or is on drugs, or is drunk, doesn't matter. I'm going to kill someone. It doesn't matter. Oh my goodness, if I kill someone, I might be executed. Not a deterrent. It's never proven to be. Also, there have been instances of innocent people actually being executed. That's a mistake we cannot correct. There are many mistakes we can correct. That's not one of them. Okay? There are alternate punishments. We do have a life without the possibility of parole. And then there's also life without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Okay, there's currently a man on death row, life without possibility. He is the doctor who sexually assaulted many athletes who were part of the USA Olympics. He's in prison for the rest of his life. He didn't kill anybody, but so there are other options. Cost of executions. Again, there's another myth that executing saves us money. As taxpayers, we want to save money. That's not true. It's more expensive to give someone, to execute someone. Why? Because it's delay. They'll appeal it, and then they'll appeal it again, and they'll go to state Supreme Court, and they'll go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. That takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of money to pay the legal expenses. So that is not accurate. A disproportionate number of people who are poor or people of color. That's ongoing problem. Cannot afford counsel, experienced counsel. A lot of those poor people, people of color, get a pro bono attorney who may have little experience in a capital crime, and therefore they're not getting the kind of effective counsel that they need. There have been stories of court-appointed lawyers who've fallen asleep during a trial, or who don't ask the questions that need to be asked. And mentally ill prisoners, that's another problem. In Kentucky, we did have a bill that would make it illegal to execute severely mentally ill prisoners. It was not passed. They didn't even touch it. Didn't happen. We do have a bill that was passed several years ago to make it illegal to execute people who are mentally challenged. That has passed. So here are some of the problems you see over here to the right. Some of the things we've done. We've talked to governors. We've been in rallies to end the death penalty. We've written letters. We've written postcards. We've signed petitions across the country. I don't know now. I think there are still 30 states that still have the death penalty. 30 states. I know Ohio does. I know Kentucky does. I don't believe Connecticut does. So again, good for Connecticut. These are some of the issues. So I want to stop for questions. I could keep going another hour, but you don't need to hear me for another hour. I will be merciful. So if there are questions, I will attempt to answer them.
Sister, how do you go about deciding on a new corporate stance? Like, can anyone bring forward an idea, or are there things you're working on?
Well, a sister or an associate can bring up an issue, and then it would go to the justice promoter like never before. And a piece of it is racism. That's a huge piece. We're at a tipping point with regard to climate change. We can just say, I'm going to pray about it. For me, that's not enough. Because if you read the Beatitudes and if you read the commandments, nowhere does it say take a sabbatical. These are, I wrote a blog saying, sometimes I think we treat the 10 commandments like they're the 10 suggestions. They're more than that. So right now we have people, and I'm concerned about this, who are choosing not to wear masks. Well, how important is my life? If you say love your neighbor as yourself, why aren't you wearing a mask? And so I just think there's so much we can focus on. We can't do everything. And I hesitate to go over all of these because it can sometimes seem overwhelming. We can't do everything, but we can do something. Do something that feels like a good fit for you. Doesn't have to be dramatic. That's all I'm saying. So I'm an optimist by nature. I'm an optimist, so I think most of the people are wanting to do something to make it a better place, planet Earth a better place. So thank you.